While John Basilone is on a bender, he's informed that he is going to be awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions on Guadalcanal. I'm kind of embarrassed to admit this, but before I saw this miniseries, I had no idea who John Basilone was. I'm sure there were a lot of people who knew his story, and when they saw that he was a character in this show, they said, "Oh, Basilone's a character in this, so he has to win the Medal of Honor sometime." But to me, this was a total shocker. Then it goes to Lecky as he stumbles down the streets looking for some female action. He runs into an Australian girl named Stella, and she tells him to meet her at her house sober. He arrives with a red rose, probably expecting to jump into bed with her within a few minutes, but her parents are there waiting anxiously to have dinner with him. At first, Lecky is a little intimidated by this, but he quickly takes a liking to her parents, and they take a liking to him. In fact, they want him to move in with them, which of course he can't resist. Stella also takes a liking to him, and they start doing what all young, horny people do, screwing whenever they get the chance. I couldn't imagine how happy Lecky was to have this after being in the miserable crap he went through for months. But Lecky isn't all about sex and falling in love with Stella. He starts to fall in love with her parents more than his own. At one point he tells Stella that he doesn't really like his family that much.
My family. Not a happy bunch, my family.
Lecky starts to feel at home with Stella and her parents, and pretty much forgets that he's in the Marines. There's a sequence when the regiment goes out on just a PT exercise, and you can tell that Lecky just can't wait to get back home in Melbourne. Then we see that after winning the Medal of Honor, Basilone is being sent back home against his will. With a heroic story and the Medal of Honor around his neck, they want him to sell war bonds instead of fighting the war. Back home with Lecky, Stella's parents couldn't be happier with having Lecky as a member of their family.
Stella, she likes you. Baba, he always wanted a son like you. I am going to pray that you come back to us.
However, Stella has a pessimistic view of this relationship. She mentioned earlier that she had a brother who died a few days after he was born, which of course was very hard on them. So she regretfully breaks up with Lecky because she thinks he's eventually going to get killed, and she, along with her parents, couldn't handle it.
She's lost so much already, Bob. She's praying for you to come back to us.
She can save her breath.
I think how the relationship was going, Lecky would have had no problem with abandoning the Marines and living in Melbourne. I wouldn't be surprised if he went out of his way to try and hide from them, so he wouldn't be sent back out to war. So of course, he behaves as though he hates the Marines.
Stand at attention. Fuck you! I said stand at attention! I said fuck you!
It's a really sad episode because you see that Lecky could have been happy and had a family with Stella. But Stella didn't want her and her family to get their hearts broken again, so she ended it. I've heard a lot of people say that they actually hate this episode. The most common answer why is, "There's no war, it's all just a romance story." Well, if that's how you feel about it, then just go back to playing your Call of Duty games, because that's obviously the type of war that you want. This is real. This is what really happened, and I thought it was great. Episode 4 begins with the Marines leaving Melbourne and being sent out to Cape Gloucester. A very depressed Lecky starts writing to his wannabe girlfriend back home as the weather on Gloucester makes life a living hell. The military thought Gloucester would be another Guadalcanal, but the Japanese got the hell out of there while the Marines just sit around and do nothing. It becomes a war against nature, and a war against sanity.
Somebody shoot me. Somebody be a good guy and just fucking shoot me!
Things get worse for Lecky when he gets a bad case of enuresis and keeps pissing himself. And his friend Runner gets a bad case of malaria. After he gets demoted and sees a lieutenant commit suicide in the rain, Lecky has sort of a mental breakdown. They send him to a hospital on the island to help his enuresis problem, but that's only part of it. He's mentally exhausted and can't take this lifestyle anymore. The hospital knows it, but he thinks he's just fine.
Why am I in with guys who need to have their razor blades taken away?
While trying to recover in the hospital, he sees the different types of casualties that war creates. Men who have completely lost their minds and can't be cured. Most of them are suicidal and aggressive. A really good scene is when the head psychiatrist talks to Lecky about what his job really is like.
You know, most of the guys that come through here are simply tired. My guess is you fall into that category.
That's your medical opinion. Shit. I could do your job.
I bet you could.
It's not a hospital made to help men, it just holds them there, almost like a prison, hoping they can basically cure themselves. In the middle of the night, Lecky looks into one of the cells where they put overly aggressive patients in, and finds one of his old friends, Gibson. He can barely even remember Lecky, and he's only been gone a couple of weeks. One of the hospital guards explains to Lecky that Gibson wanted to go home so bad that he tried to steal a plane, and when they stopped him, he tried to commit suicide. This episode shows you that the war is sort of taking its toll on the men. They're breaking down mentally and physically. Eventually, Lecky gets released from the hospital and is ready to be sent back into his regiment. They say that he's well again and ready to fight. But is he really? Once it goes into episode 5, it's really hard to tell if he's okay in the head. He's much more negative and pissy about everything, and he swears in every sentence. He wasn't like that before, but before that, it starts with Baz alone back home as he starts his Bond tour. This Bond tour has some great advantages. You get to screw celebrities. Anyway, back to the Marines on Solomon Islands. This is where the series shifts over to Eugene Sledge as he finally arrives to the 1st Marine Division on Pavuvu, along with Private Robert Oswald and Private Bill Layden. I thought this transition was good, but very bizarre. Before, the series concentrated on Lecky and his friends, who were all a bunch of funny wisecrackers, but were still great soldiers. You loved the characters and their personalities. However, Sledge is presented as sort of a mystery character. He comes off as kind of a loner, he doesn't really talk to anyone, and he always has an insecure look on his face. The regiment he's assigned to is completely different than Lecky's. He's assigned to a mortar squad with 3 Marines, Private Shelton, Corporal Bergen, and Private DeLoe. These men aren't as likable or fun as the guys in Lecky's regiment. Corporal Bergen barely says more than 2 words, and he never shows 1 ounce of emotion. Private Shelton goes by the name Snafu, and is just an asshole.
Why don't you grab a brush? Give us a hand.
Fuck that shit. I scrub drums for no man.
And why you still here?
I like to watch the new guys sweat.
The only sort of likable one is Private DeLoe. He shows Sledge around the camp, and he reunites with Sid Phillips. We're also introduced to a crazy gunnery sergeant named Haney, who likes to swing his bayonet at imaginary targets.
Yeah. Take that, you fucking Jap.
I guess Full Metal Jacket doesn't exaggerate when portraying gunnery sergeants. You gotta be an insane asshole.
Keep your fucking weapon pointed downrange, or I will shove that fucking piece up your sorry fucking ass.
The one character that is very likable is Captain Haldane, nicknamed Ak-Ak. Everyone loves him. He's a great combat leader. There's also Lieutenant Hillbilly Jones, who really doesn't get much character development, but he's kind of a mixture of Sergeant Haney and Captain Haldane. Because Sledge's regiment is full of jerks and crazies, he hangs around his friend Sid most of the time. Unfortunately, Sid is discharged and sent back home. Sledge and Lecky only share 1 scene together. Sledge is looking through his book collection and picks up the Bible. Lecky then starts talking about how he has lost faith in God.
Tell you what, though. Since I'm not on speaking terms with him anymore, next time you're having a chat with the old geezer, can you ask him to sink a few Jap transports and have them all fall on their bayonets so I can get the fuck out of here and go home?
Yeah, you can tell that breakup in Melbourne was pretty hard on him. Then begins the bloody Battle of Peleliu. We see that Sledge lands with his mortar squad on one section of the beach, and Lecky lands with his men on another section. I actually thought that once Sledge came into the series, he was going to fight alongside with Lecky and his friends, but he's actually thrown into another regiment which brings in all these new characters. The fighting on Peleliu is crazy. There are body parts everywhere. Sledge wasn't expecting any of it, but he does a good job of making it off the beach and getting into the forests. The end of this episode and episode 6 really show you that from now on, it's all going to be about Sledge. When the Marines are assaulting Peleliu Airfield, Hoosier gets hit, Runner gets hit, and while Lecky is searching for a medic, he gets injured by an explosion. It's pretty clear that this is the end of the road for the old breed. They've had their share of war, and now they're going home.
Let's go home, Cotter.
Now it's up to the new recruits to continue fighting. The island Peleliu is almost impossible to live on. They keep saying that they have absolutely no water, and it's taking forever to deliver some. They find some puddles of water, but it turns out that the Japanese poisoned it.
Poison. Jap fuckers poisoned it.
The Marines have to cross the airfield to take out the Japanese defenses. The whole scene is basically the Marines running towards the airfield while they get hit by bullets and explosions. It plays this haunting music which, to me at least, is saying, what a waste of human life. Powerful stuff. Private Oswald gets killed, leaving Sledge and Snafu to man the mortars. Sledge really distinguishes himself in the battle. He pulls Snafu to safety, then he takes out all the Japanese emplacements near the airfield with his mortars. Because he's proven himself to the regiment, he earns the nickname Sledgehammer.
Thanks, Sledgehammer.
Sledgehammer. I like that.
After the airfield, Sledgehammer and the regiment move further inland. There's one scene that's really messed up. While the regiment are pitching camp for the night, one Marine just starts going crazy and screaming his head off. They try to stop him, but they can't do anything to shut him up. Eventually, they have to bash his head in with a shovel, which kills him. It's pretty messed up, but pretty realistic.
I guess better him than all of us.
From there, it segues into episode 7, and this is where things start to go a little downhill. It opens with a montage showing Sledgehammer recount the days that he has been on Peleliu Island. From the second they landed, it's been brutal chaos, and he knows that no matter what, it's going to continue. But they at least get some time to rest in between fights. I like the scene when the dock worker approaches the combat veterans about buying a souvenir from them. Yeah, like they'd accept money out there.
Any kind of Jap weapon, I'll take it. I gotta get me a Jap sword. Can't go home from the war empty-handed.
You can arrange for a Purple Heart.
Ain't nobody going home.
It's also nice to see Captain Haldane interact with his men. He cares about them and understands that his men need to respect him. After that, the rest of the episode is a downward spiral into savage combat. One of my favorite scenes in the whole series is in this episode. While setting up the mortars, Sledgehammer hears Japanese soldiers hiding in a bunker. They try their best to surround it while the Japanese fire all around. A grenade is thrown out and blows up right in front of Bill Layden. The rest of the scene is just an unorganized close combat nightmare. Well, just look at it.
Hold on, Bill.
Look at me. Look at me.
I mean, jeez, is that crazy or what? After that, Sledgehammer starts to kinda lose it. In every scene, it looks like he's contemplating suicide.
You okay?
Why don't they just surrender?
Because they're Japs. We're gonna have to root them out one by one. Fucking rats.
Out of all the Marines, Captain Haldane understands the way Sledgehammer feels and just straight up tells it how it is.
You can't dwell on it. You can't dwell on any of it.
That's one thing this movie really shows. Everything that happens is terrible, but you just have to block it out of your mind and try to function like a machine. You can't dwell on it. Words of wisdom.